Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kayla Isabel, and I'm the CEO here at Startup Canada. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am on today is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We also acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples of this country. I encourage each and every one of you to take a moment now to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are residing on today. Entrepreneurs wear sleep deprivation as a badge of honor and started to trend to make others believe that they need to sleep fewer hours to appear as committed, focused, and determined. I know I'm definitely guilty of this over the years. And today we're really here to gather and change this narrative. We want to be actively having these conversations to debunk some of these conceptions around what it takes to be an entrepreneur and how do we balance both our mental health and our hustle, or what we call our health and hustle. Studies have shown that sleep deprivation is linked directly to various health outcomes like increased risk of cardiovascular issues, depression, anxiety, obesity, and injury, as well as poor sense of judgment. I'm really excited about having this conversation today with our partners at BDC, who are making this event possible, in addition to a number of additional mental health initiatives that we are running across the country over the last couple of months and into the fall. I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists who are going to be engaging in this conversation today, approaching sleep, approaching mental health, specifically from the lens of being an entrepreneur. How do we have this conversation and this dialogue from a few different vantage points, really guided by some concrete data? So today's panel is going to be moderated by the incredible Shawn from BDC. He is currently the Assistant Vice President of External Communications at BDC, where he is also the executive sponsor of the organization's LGBTQ2+ Employee Resource Group and a member of its Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Council. Welcome to the virtual stage, Shawn.
Hi, thanks.
We will also have a number of panelists that we're going to be engaging today. We have Mark Coombs, who is the CEO and co-founder of SleepOut. And before SleepOut, Mark led revenue functions at 2 high-growth Canadian tech startups. We also have Hannah Brennen, and Hannah is the co-founder and COO of SleepOut. And she has been a top sales rep at a number of early stage companies and has worked for and has experience leading projects in IBM's global consulting practice. So we are going to be learning all things about SleepOut very soon, but welcome to the virtual stage, Mark and Hannah.
Thank you so much, Kayla, for having us.
No problem, no problem. And then last but not least, we will have Sean Burke. So we've got 2 Seans on our virtual stage today. Shawn is the founder and CEO of CheckingIn. And many of you might be familiar with CheckingIn from our CheckingIn challenge that we did earlier this year, asking entrepreneurs through our startup communities and through the Startup Canada network to do a daily check-in on their mental health throughout the month of May. Shawn, as a serial entrepreneur, has founded and led 2 successful organizations over the past 10 years and has a huge passion and reputation for building socially responsible products, integrated teams, and scalable cultures. So we'll be learning all things CheckingIn, understanding the data behind what led us to today's session, and some valuable takeaways and next steps in the very end of the session as well. So now I'm going to pass things over to Shawn from BDC to kick off moderating today's session. Shawn, over to you.
Thanks, Kayla. And hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today with you. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Startup Canada, for inviting me to take part in today's discussion. I have to say that this is a topic that really strikes close to home for BDC. And I'll tell a quick story. 3 years ago, Kayla and I met, I believe, for the first time. I think we were in Calgary, and both expressed the importance of exploring this topic and how it impacts entrepreneurs. And I'm so relieved and so happy and thrilled to see that it is a topic that we're discussing today that's taking more place and that more people are discussing. So I want to definitely salute and thank all the business owners who have the courage to speak about mental health because it is an important it's such an important thing to take care of. And with mental health comes your sleep, of course. BDC's purpose is to support small and medium-sized businesses across the country, as many of you know. And while entrepreneurs work tirelessly to make their businesses a success, one thing that we know, as do you, is that no one can add time to the day, at least not anyone that I know. But what we can do is work to get the most out of the time that we have and be more productive while we're doing it. BDC started looking at this, like I said, about 3 years ago. We partnered up with the Canadian Mental Health Association to complete the first ever study that looked at entrepreneurship and mental health. What we found, I can't say was surprising. We confirmed really statistically that entrepreneurs are facing more mental health issues than the general population. What is more, and what really does check in or check out with the study that was done in the CheckIn challenge is that, in terms of the most commonly reported experiences of physical stress on entrepreneurs were fatigue. And 62% of entrepreneurs who responded stated that fatigue was one of those physical stressors. And secondly, disrupted sleep at 56%. That was 3 years ago. So as many of us know already, studies have shown, and I know Kayla's mentioned this just previously, but high levels of fatigue and sleep problems are very often precursors to depression and burnout. And so it's something that we really do need to take very importantly. Now, the study that we did was in 2019, so that was pre-COVID. Imagine today. And so during the pandemic, early in its onset, BDC began also surveying entrepreneurs to understand how they were coping with the pandemic. And what I can say is that when we first did our study in 2019, mental health wasn't really a topic that was top of mind for the majority of entrepreneurs. Our recent surveys during the pandemic have confirmed that it is something that the majority of entrepreneurs are now dealing with, are now discussing, and are now addressing within their organizations. What our study also did confirm, and I'd say all 4 of them, is that when we look at specific groups, there are groups that stand out in terms of being more affected by mental health issues. That includes women entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, visible minorities. And so we do need to also take into account those special considerations to ensure that we're doing what we need to ensure that all groups are having access to the kind of mental health resources that they need. So basically, entrepreneurs have a lot on their shoulders with or without the pandemic. COVID just made things more difficult for them. I also want to add that we often say that stress is a good thing in terms of developing a business. It can drive motivation. It can inspire entrepreneurs to solve problems in creative, innovative ways. And while this can be true in small doses, high levels of stress are not a good thing. They're linked to disturbed sleep, which in turn, as Kayla said, can lead to reduced alertness, diminished cognitive skills, and a loss of creativity overall. So, it's a bit of a yin and a yang. And so basically, I'll end on the fact that I too agree it's high time that we prioritize sleep and include healthy sleep habits and rituals in our regular wellness routine. On that note, I would like to now hand it off to Shawn to tell us a bit more about himself and about what he's doing over at his startup. Shawn.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawn. And Kayla as well, too, for the warm introductions there. I think when it comes to sleep, one of the things that personally really impacts me is this notion of what if I could just get one more email out? Or what if I could just tie up that last sales, notes that we needed to, or product improvement. And really the question that I always have to ask and remind myself is, what if I don't? What's going to happen if I don't make that happen? And oftentimes I think we get caught up in this notion, at least, speaking from my own experience, that we need to make this happen, or we need to get it done because there's no one else that's going to do it. And as Shawn mentioned, yes, that can be a motivation and driving force for us to achieve, to have what we might perceive as being success. It also too comes at a cost. And so really what, I want to speak about today is through this through the 30-day challenge, which we ran with Startup Canada and Volition this past summer, we wanted to share some of the findings that really came out from an emotional perspective and an emotional toll that one, sleep obviously has a huge impact on, but also two, just the demands of being that entrepreneur, of being that leader, and oftentimes, having to make those different decisions. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to go through a little bit about the outcomes and the findings from the 30-day challenge, as well as talk a little bit about how that ultimately shaped the topic of conversation that we're here today. So if I share my screen here, a few guys over here, there we go. So when it comes down to it, Checking In, what we are is a proactive mental health platform. And we are providing a tool for people to empower them to show up as their true self. How we do that and how the 30-day challenge worked is we ask people to check in daily. So we understand that through emotional intelligence and primarily self-awareness, we can help people to understand how they're feeling and what they potentially need in order to move from different feelings or move into different areas that maybe they want to feel. So that check-in consists of two simple questions. One, what's your word? And two, what's your number? So the number is meant to be on a scale of 1 to 10, your energy level. So in the moment, how much energy do I have? 1, am I really low energy? Or 10, do I have a crazy amount of energy? And then the second question is, how are you feeling? Pretty basic. But the reality is that we don't take the time often to ask ourselves these two questions and understand where we're starting from. And without having this awareness of self, it's very difficult to make different changes that might be lasting or have that impact on your emotional well-being. So then what we do within the tool is we say, okay, well, now that you know you might be feeling a 7 and anxious or a 5 and tired, well, what do you need right now in order to shift and build that resilience to be able to process and work through that emotion or that feeling or that state of being? And so that's where we have different exercises, whether it's breath work, meditations, movement, or other CBT activities that will support you to work through those. And lastly, there's different reflections to help you go even deeper with a simple reflection question and prompt to, again, help you understand what's going on and maybe where in your life can you shift or prioritize or send different focus to help you, again, work through those emotions. All along, and this is the point of today, we're collecting these insights. And these insights are served back to you as the individual in a confidential and anonymous way. And what it's designed to do is help you understand different patterns in your life. So, do I have higher energies on Mondays or Fridays? Or am I seeing lower energies in the morning versus the afternoon? What are the common words and themes that are coming up? And more specifically, as we move into September, we're really placing an emphasis on sleep and showing people what is the emotional toll that your sleep ultimately has on your mental health. So jumping into the actual 30-day challenge results, in terms of participation, we had, it was over 250 people who participated. The breakdown, primarily, the two biggest provinces were Ontario and British Columbia. But a fun fact, we did have at least one participant from every province or territory, which was super cool because we were able to reach everyone across the country. And when it came to actual participation, the Yukon, although they had a smaller number of participants, they had the highest engagement per user. So really interesting, and kudos to the team up there. For really pushing and prioritizing their mental well-being. In terms of the most number of check-ins, BC had the highest number of check-ins. And then in terms of the most number of mindfulness exercises, Ontario had the most number there. In terms of engagement, so across the 30 days, we had over 1,100 total actions that were taken. So this ranges through the different check-ins, reflections, and mindfulness exercises. And really what this information is telling us is that the simplicity and brevity of being able to check in on your emotional well-being is what is the most important. And so that made it accessible for entrepreneurs. We know that everybody is super busy, and adding an extra to-do list item or adding an extra 30 minutes here in your day is really not possible. So instead, we approached it with, could we approach mental health and self-awareness with simplicity and brevity? And through that simple two-step check-in process and having it take less than 30 seconds, that's ultimately what led the highest engagement in terms of people checking in with their emotional well-being. The reflections component, we had about 304 different reflections completed, and that's going to range through whatever topic or interest that individual was experiencing. And then lastly, coming in with the mindfulness exercises, this is where the most engagement really happens and the most amount of time spent on the tool, but it allows people to really process and work through those different emotions and experience. Maybe if you are feeling joyful or content or happy or excited, can you stay with that feeling longer? Because oftentimes we have a tendency to gravitate towards those perceived negative emotions, and they stick with us longer. But what about the positive ones that we might be experiencing? And how do we really stay with those feelings and ride that wave longer as well? So into the data. As you can see here, what we did is we took the average, we consolidated all of the data. It's completely anonymous and confidential. This aggregation of data shows, and this was obviously the first day where we were getting set up, but you can see here the trend is, it's pretty consistent. So there wasn't a significant outlier. We're going to exclude this first day here. And you can slowly see an upward trend. So starting off from just below 5, upwards towards 7 around the end, with an average daily energy of 6.3. And what's interesting here is that when you look at the total global population of checking in versus the entrepreneurial population here through Startup Canada and Volition, the average energy overall for our total population is 6.1. So to go from 6.1 to see entrepreneurs at 6.3, there was a slight deviation or slight increase, but nothing substantial. And there wasn't really a significant outlier with respect to those average daily energies. Now, when you come over here to this graph, the time of day, you can see that the vast majority of people were checking in the morning. So over 55% were checking in the morning, 26% were checking in the evening, and then 19% checking in during the day. Now, what's interesting here is that there is a big difference. So when you look at the morning check-ins versus the evening, you see a full decrease of 1, which might not sound like a lot, but it actually is, given obviously the variability in terms of how the data and how people are reporting their average energy levels. So what that's telling us is that typically entrepreneurs in this group have higher energies in the morning. So when we're trying to prioritize our well-being and trying to prioritize our days, how can we set up and structure our days so that we have the highest value tasks or items that we're performing in the morning versus maybe the evening? Or maybe that extra email that I started out talking about, maybe that we shouldn't send that in the evening and prolong our day because we know we're going to have more energy in the morning.
Hey, Shawn, just a question that I have, because this is fascinating, and thank you for sharing these results, which are spanned over 30 days. From your perspective, you would also probably have a view of energy levels throughout the year as well. What time of the year was this conducted? And do you think, from the data that you have, that there are different months during the year where there's greater energy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this study was taken in May when we did the 30-day challenge. So typically what we do find is around October, November, there's definitely decreased energy levels, and depending obviously on where geographically people are located, you'll see different impacts with respect to seasonal affect disorder, or other variables that may be playing as to why cyclically you would have higher or lower energies. We also do have different data that's broken up by days of the week. And interestingly enough, Monday actually isn't the lowest energy level day, which a lot of people might think. It was actually Tuesday,
Really?
which is kind of interesting. Saturday actually is a lower energy day as well, which surprised us. But yeah, there's definitely different patterns. And one of the things that we do when we're working with different companies is helping them to identify those patterns and then benchmarking that relative to our global population as well. So it does get really interesting when you start slicing and dicing the data. Yeah, it's definitely fascinating.
Great, thanks.
In terms of jumping into the feelings, I just want to make sure that, I'm staying on time here as well. This is probably the most interesting and the most fascinating when it comes to the outcome of the check-ins. And not surprisingly, if you look at the top 5 words here, what stands out is tired. Tired was the most frequently used word. It was used 83 times, where the second most frequent word came in as calm and anxious at 23. So you're seeing, from a statistical significance, an extreme divergence here when it comes to tired. Now, one of the things that we're really trying to work on and help people understand is that tired related to emotional fatigue, physical fatigue? What is beneath the feeling of being tired? And so, part of that, as we started going deeper and asking people, what does tired mean to you? Really, it came down to 2 key components. The first is sleep, and the second is just lack of emotional clarity. So when it comes to today's conversation, when we were debriefing the results with the Startup Canada team, it really became evident that, hey, we need to prioritize sleep when it comes to entrepreneurs. And what a great opportunity to, bring in Mark and Hannah and Shawn with your experience and be able to talk about what are some ways that we can optimize sleep? What are ways that we can, understand how sleep shows up in our daily lives, and how can we build best practices around that?
And that's a great segue, Shawn. So thanks for that, because we'll shift kind of gears now to talk a little bit more about the importance of sleeping better, and the downsides of sleep deprivation. So perhaps now, Hannah and Mark, if you want to just introduce yourselves, and then we can get the conversation going.
Sure, yeah, we can do a quick intro. Thank you, Shawn. So we're both versed in early stage tech companies. We've launched SleepOut, which is a sleep e-commerce company, mainly around our own need to have our room dark. But for me personally, I've suffered from insomnia, also being related to an entrepreneur. So very, very familiar with these topics, and we're super happy to be here.
Great, thanks for coming. Hannah, any words?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, thank you, Shawn and Kayla. It's interesting. Mark's had sleep trouble for pretty much his whole life, and I've actually been the opposite. I was somebody who really didn't think about sleep very much, and I think for most of school, I was running on a solid 4 hours, daily, and didn't realize how much that was affecting me until a little bit later. And more recently, where I've got an autoimmune disorder, and when I don't get enough sleep, my symptoms, specifically really bad anxiety and physical tremors, get exacerbated. And so sort of getting into SleepOut and spending more time with Mark, who cares a lot about sleep, it's totally opened up my eyes to it. Shifted away from thinking about sort of sacrificing hours in the day awake to investing in having better hours the next day. And that's made a huge change. It's so important, and we're super excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's great. And so what you're pointing out here is a great dichotomy, right? Some people have difficulty sleeping. It's not something that comes naturally for them. Others, like myself, I'll tell you, I put my head on the pillow and I'm out, right? So yeah, I'd be really curious to know, though. I mean, from each of your perspectives, do you think entrepreneurs tend to fall into one or the other category, or is it a question of not prioritizing sleep?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk a little bit about some of the data that we just saw. Look, it's really not surprising, right? So one of the things that Hannah and I did was we interviewed some really top sleep researchers. So Dr. Michael Grandner, who actually advises the US Olympic team, and Dr. Jamie Zeitzer out of Stanford. And entrepreneur, it's really the cultural aspect, the hustle culture. So I wasn't surprised to see tired as number one. But in our conversations with our peers, like it's kind of, you're expected to be tired. If you're not tired, then you're not working enough. And so I think I'm so glad that we're having this discussion, because there needs to be a cultural shift. Most entrepreneurs, they have a good diet, they tend to exercise well, but when it comes to sleep, it tends to be the number one kind of sacrifice. If I need to get something done or work harder, well, we'll just sleep for 4 hours, and that's so wrong. And that's really critical to discuss.
Yeah, I think just adding to that too, I mean, whether you're a person who falls asleep the minute your head hits the pillow, or you're somebody who has sleep trouble, or you fall somewhere in the middle, I think most people have sleep troubles at some point during their life. And from these interviews, that's normal and it's okay to have that happen. Sleep deprivation affects everybody the same way. And it's important to everybody, and the benefits of getting enough sleep are also like as effective for every single person. So it makes a huge difference in your ability and your focus and everything you're doing as an entrepreneur.
I mean, one thing for sure, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs over the last 10 years, and many are looking to build the next great unicorn, the next great Canadian unicorn. And so what I would say is, to those entrepreneurs who are looking to build that, huge success of a company, is it possible to reach unicorn status and sleep, a decent amount of time at the same time?
I think so. I think like, and you have more data on about the effects of sleep on decision making. But again, it's like, it's diet and exercise, and sleep is a pillar of health. So if you want to make good, solid decisions, you want to actually get more work done during the day, then you're going to prioritize sleep properly. I think this culture of sleeping for 4 hours, or polyphasic sleep, or looking for sleep hacks to get rid of your sleep is probably going away. But
Yeah, like your body runs on rhythms. And I mean, can you have a good productive day without eating anything? I mean, maybe you're probably going to be really angry and hangry and miserable. And I mean, sleep works. Yeah.
it's also
But sleep's similar. So one of the things that came up when we had our session with Dr. Grander was just what sleep deprivation actually means and what it does to your brain and your body. Sleep deprivation really impacts, or enough sleep impacts you in 4 different domains. So there's physical performance, which is like your speed, your reaction time, your strength. When you go to the gym, how are you going to do? There's also mental performance. So that's what you really think about with entrepreneurship, like focus, decision-making, creativity, and just your ability to remember things even and retain. Then there's sort of, in the athletic world, injury prevention, but that also ties into health and immunity. When you talk to doctors and they feel like they're getting sick, they don't take a bunch of medicine. They just go put on a hoodie and sleep for 12 hours, because it's such a strong boost to the immune system. And then finally, and what we're talking about today as well, is mental health. Sleep deprivation is linked with stress, with anxiety, increased risk of depression. Darkness specifically is also linked with depression, more so than sleep deprivation, but it really affects you in all of these different domains, and they're all connected together. Physical performance, mental performance, immunity, and sort of injury prevention and mental health. So if you're looking to build a unicorn, I mean, you want to be doing that with the best of what you have every day, and bringing your whole brain and your whole self to work. Getting enough sleep is going to make that so much easier than if you try to do it on like half the sleep that you need.
Great. So you heard it here from Hannah. You want to build that unicorn, you've got to get those hours of sleep in. That's great. And so, we talked about hours of sleep and sleeping. We haven't talked too much about the quality of the sleep, because one can, I know there are some nights where I sleep 8 hours, but I felt like I was up all night. Any observations or findings in some of your research, or some of the CheckIn challenge results that speak to the quality of sleep that entrepreneurs are getting?
Shawn, did you want to grab that first?
Sure. Yeah. I in terms of the actual quality of sleep, I think one of the biggest things that when we talk to our different users, the number one most important thing with sleep is the consistency of sleep. So whether that's, going to bed within a 30-minute time frame each night the same, it's kind of like, when people travel across the country and they have the 3-hour time difference, and then they come back and they say, oh, I'm so tired, I'm exhausted. It's like, well, yeah, because you went to bed 3 hours later or stayed up 3 hours later than you normally would. And I think that that's something where when it comes to sleep habits and getting that quality of sleep, one of the biggest lessons that we've learned through all the different I guess practitioners is that have shared with us is getting that consistency of time to bed. There's also, I'm sure you guys will talk about it more, but there's a lot of other tips and tricks in terms of the types of food, diet, and everything else as well.
Yeah, so just around that routine, absolutely is super critical. And that is the number one, like Dr. Brennen told, if there's one thing that I can tell you that's more important than anything, it's routine. And that's because our bodies are very old, hardwired mechanisms. They really like just consistency, and they're pattern recognition systems. So stimulus control is the number one thing that you can do right now that'll help you get better sleep. Our bedroom is a dark, cold cave, and we only go in there to sleep. And that's really, really critical. So if you're having problems sleeping, and this is really big during the pandemic and the work from home era, where people have been working out of their bedrooms or working right beside their bedrooms, you need to try to split where you're working as far away from that room as possible, because you want to get it to the point where your body enters that bedroom and you can be like Shawn and just hit the pillow and pass right out instantly. And that can take a while if you've been using your phone in there, if you've been working in there or working even nearby it. If you are having problems sleeping, if you're suffering, the best thing you can do is actually counterintuitive, which is get up and leave the bedroom. So do not stay in the bedroom, fretting over sleep, looking at the clock. You shouldn't be in there for more than 20 minutes. You should actually leave and then read a book or do anything that calms your system down, because again, you're building that stimulus control where I only get in this room for sleep and nothing else. So that's probably the easiest and best thing that you could do to get a better sleep.
Okay. And so we just have a question that's come in now for Shawn, but the listener is asking, how did entrepreneurs' data differ from the general population when it came to the word cloud? So, how did tired rank for the general population? Is that something that you looked at?
Not specifically, but I can speak to it. In terms of, we did do a study with the University of British Columbia and the psychology lab there. And what we found was, from the general population perspective, 12% of our words were tired, or related to tired, whether it was fatigue or something else. And so from that perspective, the next closest word from a frequency perspective was 3%. So again, you're seeing like the general population consistent with obviously the intensity when it comes to sleep and being tired. I wouldn't say that necessarily entrepreneurs might be experiencing it different than the general population. I think there might potentially be different reasons as to why entrepreneurs would, have tired and sleep being one of the biggest feelings that they consistently come up with or talk about. But yeah, so it's definitely consistent with the general population as well.
Interesting. And maybe a question for all three panelists, but I'd be curious to hear from you. Do you think people and entrepreneurs specifically are sleeping better or worse during the pandemic? I have I have an opinion on the topic, but I'd like to hear from you what you think that is.
So there's actually some really interesting data on this with respect to just the general population. I mean, if you remember back at the beginning of the pandemic, people were talking about the weird COVID dreams that they were having. And so the answer is kind of two things. I think people are generally more stressed, and you've seen these we're in a mental health crisis. You've seen anxiety and depression absolutely skyrocket, and that seriously affects your ability to sleep. So I think for the majority of people, not necessarily sleeping as well. As we've started to get back to normal and people are starting to be on routines again, that routine helps with your sleep quality. But the COVID dreams and what was starting to happen is people who'd have to get up really early to go commute to work or to go and physically go to their wherever they'd be spending their day would generally cut out the last like hour or two of sleep. And that is, and if you look at sleep cycles, different types of sleep, deep sleep, NREM sleep, which is just like normal sleep, and then REM, where most of your dreams happen. The highest concentration of REM sleep happens in the last 2 to 3 hours. So between 6 and 8 hours of being asleep. And that's the part of sleep that people who now don't have to commute are needing to add on to their sleep schedule. So COVID dreams are just dreams, but this giant culture of, don't sleep enough, get up early for work, go to bed late to finish work, make sure that you squeeze all these things in. If you have kids or you're an entrepreneur and you have kids, that's your like hour or two at the end of the night where you have some time to yourself. COVID created an opportunity for people to sleep in a little bit longer than they normally would, and we're dreaming more. And it's just, I find it so interesting because it's the quality of sleep. The data sort of says it's better and it's worse for different groups of people. The stress and anxiety definitely harms quality, but the dreams specifically were happening basically because certain parts of the population are just sleeping more than they normally would be.
That's fascinating. COVID dreams. I'm going to go to bed smarter today. So that's amazing. And I mean, on our end, what I'd say is, for myself, I mean, I just know that I was drinking more during COVID during the week as opposed to just weekends, and so I was going to bed in a different state, so that quality of sleep wasn't there as much as well. Do you think that those kinds of behavioral changes may have impacted maybe the other end of someone's sleep, of entrepreneurs' sleep patterns? So not the REM side, but the ability to get to bed early and really get a good quality sleep.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My own condition worsened during COVID significantly because the routines got thrown off significantly, right? One of the other big aspects that we haven't talked about yet is just outdoor light and circadian rhythm. So a lot of people during COVID weren't going outside as much. And one of the things that we learned from Dr. Zeitzer, who's actually an authority on circadian rhythms, is just taking a walk outside, even for 30 minutes, is massive. Like there's 50,000 to 100,000 lux outside. I didn't even know, most people buy these light therapy lamps and they're 10,000 lux, and that seems like a lot of light. And what light is, but if you actually just walk outside, it's 50,000 to 100,000. Inside is actually in the low hundreds. So you don't really realize the contrast there, but by staying inside all day, you're really depriving yourself significantly of a lot of light. So that early morning commute for a lot of Torontonians or people who lived in downtown cores, they're missing out on a ton of that light. So that hurt them right there. And then later, they're working later at night. And again, in the stimulus part of what I said, they would have their laptops in their bed or they're checking Slack on their phone, and those things will kill your sleep. Absolutely.
No, that's great. Go ahead, Shawn. Yeah.
I was just going to add to that. I got my little light here. You can see it as I turn on and off.
Awesome.
But that was exactly what we found through our data as well, is that the disruption of the routines and the immediate change from, okay, this is our plan to get to work and time cycles and everything, and being able to disconnect from work, that significantly was thrown off. And then ultimately what we saw is that increased feelings of anxiety, stress, even feelings of loneliness really crept up. And that was something that led to different behavioral changes that you mentioned, Shawn, whether it's coping mechanisms to drink more, or to watch one more episode of Netflix because you're deep in a series. I'm guilty of that. But, I think that those were certain things that for people that we spoke with, they didn't really realize that until they started to tune into, okay, how does this feel? And so by understanding that comes back to then, okay, well, now what can I do about it? And it gives them a way forward. So whether it's, darkening the room, whether it's creating a colder sleep environment, that's ultimately where they were able to get some momentum to make some changes moving forward.
No, that's great, Sean. And you read my mind, because I think, maybe we shift the discussion from the downsides of sleep deprivation to ways entrepreneurs can prioritize sleep and create maybe healthier sleep routines, or I like to call them rituals in a way, to repeat on a daily basis. So any opinions on, the top 3 or 4 ways that entrepreneurs can really optimize their sleep? Maybe I'll hand it over to Matt to start.
Okay. Okay, yeah, sure. I can go. So
Okay, Hannah, thanks.
so I mean, a couple different things. The biggest one is routine. So having a consistent bedtime. But there are a couple of specific tips or ways to make that easier and more possible. I mean, what actually happens when you're going to sleep is like your systems are winding down. So darkness is huge. The contrast between darkness and light is what your body's actually measuring, and that's why lux is so important. That's also why you want to make your bed associated with sleep rather than associated with like being on your phone or watching TV. But in terms of specific tips, I mean, get into a routine. Generally, we were really surprised on the extent to which this is a thing. But having your phone or other like computational devices, phone, computer, in your bedroom makes it really easy to miss cues from your body that you're tired. So, there's a lot of knowledge out there about blue light and how blue light is bad, and it prevents your body from producing melatonin, which is the hormone that helps you get tired and go to sleep, stay asleep. What's interesting is that recent research has found cell phones and computers are basically these like brain firing, exciting devices where there's this all sorts of knowledge, all sorts of this connected world, and they just get your brain going. So by removing that, you're going to allow yourself to find cues from your body that you're tired. You're going to allow your brain to start winding down, getting ready for sleep, and you're going to be putting yourself in an environment that's dark and that's cool, and it's physically, what our bodies have evolved to sleep in. So short answer is no phones in the bedroom, but longer answer is give yourself an opportunity to actually pick up on your body's cues that you're tired, rather than keeping yourself so mentally occupied and distracted that you miss those in the first place.
And the phone is a great alternative. Tablets as well, I assume. But maybe speak to me about other cues that that people or entrepreneurs can use. Are there other techniques like meditation before you go to bed? Things that you can do actively before you hit the pillow?
Yeah, I mean, ideally you are not on the computer right before you hit the pillow. And everybody, like every entrepreneur's done this. It's like, oh, I just want to check my email one more time. And then there's like some disaster email in there. Like, why did I check that? Like, I'm never going to sleep now, right? And everybody does it. But I don't think we can convince entrepreneurs not to work until they go to bed. Like ideally, again, you're reading fiction or you're doing something that's really separate from work. So you're telling your body every night in the same way that it's time for bed in a way. The best things that you can do, though, again, are to separate work in that way. So you're working somewhere completely different, and then you're going in and sleeping at night. I think some of the critical things, aside from having a dark and cool room, if you're really suffering like I was, you need to do meditation, and you should probably even get some cognitive behavioral therapy. Like when you get in a really negative sleep cycle, like I was in a really bad sleep cycle where I was sleeping 4 hours per night, you get this deep anxiety about going to bed at all. You're just like, is this going to be another one of those nights? In that case, actually being able to examine your thinking around sleep, like your anxiety around it, and letting that go is going to be more critical than any sleep product that you could buy. You actually really just need to be able to examine your thinking in that case if you're really suffering.
Yeah, and rationalize, I'm assuming, right? So
yeah, for sure.
I want to add something too about melatonin, because that's become very popular lately, and I see billboards daily on this new melatonin stuff. We learned in our session with Dr. Grandner what melatonin is kind of for and how it works. So your body naturally produces melatonin, and it can be really effective, but I think a lot of people take it as a sedative. It's bedtime and I'm starting to get tired and I want to stay asleep, so I'm going to take some melatonin. It's actually not a sedative. It's melatonin is, your body produces it automatically. Middle of the day, it's producing very little melatonin. As you get closer to your regular bedtime, your body will start to produce more and more, and then it'll peak at about 2-3 a.m. And start to tail off towards the morning when you wake up. So taking melatonin in the middle of the day, for example, isn't going to do very much because your body already knows that it's daytime and there isn't any there already. And taking it right as you're about to go to bed is also not going to do anything if it's your regular bedtime, because your body's already got all of the melatonin that it needs. What melatonin is for is more like shifting your circadian clock forward or back. So if you're somebody who doesn't really have a routine and you want to commit to sleep hygiene and you want to see how much that can make a difference for you, taking melatonin about an hour earlier than you'd regularly go to bed, your body's already sort of expecting it, and that's where it can really make a difference. To shift your clock, you usually go to bed at 2 a.m. You want to start going to bed at 11. You can take it at like 1 and then 12 and then 11, and it'll help you either go to bed a little bit earlier and feel tired earlier, or if you're waking up too early in the morning and want to keep yourself asleep for an extra hour or so, you can take it when you first wake up and just prolong that a little bit.
Just one other thing on that, like you actually don't need nearly as much melatonin as what's being packaged. You don't need 10 milligrams or 5 milligrams. This was mind blowing to me as someone that's used it for a long time. You actually need like less than 1 milligram. Like that's what your body's producing at night to go to sleep. So yeah,
Right.
you don't taking 15 or 20 or anything crazy.
So then I have full authority in telling my husband to stop buying the endless bottles of melatonin he's consuming, right? Good. Okay, thank you. I'm leaving again with something else to help me in my daily routine. We've got a few more questions that have come in. The one question is there one day of the week perhaps that matters most to sleep? For example, some people will think that, use the weekends to recharge, which is not always a luxury that entrepreneurs have. So I'd like to hear you out on that.
Yeah, that's the danger, right? So that's what I was doing too, is I wasn't sleeping well during the week. And I was like, oh, I'll just catch up on all that sleep on the weekends. And basically what you're doing is, as Sean said before, you're traveling all the way across country on the weekends, and then you're expecting your body to be normal during the weekdays. It's just a recipe for disaster. So everybody's going to stay up a little bit later on the weekends and get up a bit later. That's fine. But if you're really pushing it and actually trying to catch up, so you're getting up at 8 a.m. during the weeks or earlier, and you're sleeping in until 11 or 12 on the weekends, you're really going to hurt your sleep, right? Again, we're pattern recognition machines. The more that you can just tell your body, go to bed at this time, wake up at this time, go to this room, feel sleepy, go to this room, feel awake and work, the better you're going to be.
Makes a lot of sense. Shawn, I'd be curious to know, in the CheckIn challenge, it was pretty consistent and with your overall result of 6.3, but did you see any dips on certain days of the week that came back on a weekly pattern?
There was nothing significant or, that from the 30-day challenge that really stood out. But what I will speak to is, from my own personal experience, one of the things that I, as an entrepreneur, recognized and realized was towards the weekend, I had this mentality when I first started checking in with myself and tracking all this data. I started realizing that I was using the weekends as an opportunity to let go. And so, that meant extra drinks on the weekend. It meant, eating later at night. And doing all these things that negatively would impact my sleep. And then what the data would show me over time is that my weekends were actually my lowest energy days, because it had nothing to do with the fact that, I was working more or there was more stress or anxiety. It was the fact that I was depleting my body because I was trying to run away or escape from some of the challenges of being an entrepreneur. And I think if anyone's listening to this today, and you're also in that boat, what I would say to you is it's really most important to understand why. Why might you be able, or why might you be, or what are you running from? And why are you using certain, whether it's alcohol or staying up later, watching those Netflix, binge eating, why? And I think getting to the deeper understanding of that ultimately then helps you prepare to take these tips that, Hannah and Mark and yourself, Shawn, are talking about.
That's an excellent point, Shawn. So thank you for that. And it's so important to understand the underlying causes or the root causes of why we do what we do. And I think, what you just said probably impacts the majority of people. on a Friday night, there's nothing better for me than to serve myself a nice gin and tonic. So I get it. Another question that we've received as well is, for those of us who struggle with sleep schedules, so I'm excluding myself from this question, but would you recommend trying out, in French you call it l'immunotherapie, so light therapy, and those special clocks that will wake you up slowly from a certain point to allow you to wake up at the best possible moment?
I definitely would. I mean, I think that the circadian rhythm, or actually starting out your day with a lot of light, it's super critical, and it actually gives that signal to your body about at certain times when what's around you is dark to go to sleep. We did find, though, again from Dr. Zeitzer, is that a walk outside is actually stronger than that light therapy lamp. I didn't know that. So I didn't know that if you took a walk outside, you're actually going to get somewhere closer to 50,000 lux versus the 10,000 lux light therapy lamp. Now, not everybody can do that. Some people work in darker spaces and they need to use the light therapy lamp, so do that. But if you can take a 20-30 minute walk, like first thing when you get up in the morning, that's going to be really critical for you.
The other thing that helped me a lot was just understanding that feeling sleepy in the morning is normal. You wake up with this thing called sleep inertia, and you wake up feeling really tired and you're like, oh, I didn't get a good night's sleep. But that tired feeling is it turns out the same feeling that allows you to wake up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or get a glass of water and fall back asleep. And that's normal and okay. So when you wake up, what we were told again from Dr. Granner was, look at how you're feeling sort of 15-30 minutes after you've gotten out of bed and you've gotten some light exposure and you're up and at 'em, and base your energy level on that rather than on the sort of groggy sleep inertia. I've just peeled myself out of my sheets and I want to get back into them, because that's normal, and that is actually the thing that lets you fall asleep in the middle of the night, and it's okay to feel like that.
Yeah, and it'll differ a lot for some people. Some people are morning people, and I assume that they probably are less groggy for less long than those who say they're not morning people, right? Fascinating. Thanks, Hannah, and thanks, Mark. We're gonna now ask Shawn to tell us a little bit more about CheckIn's new challenge. And there you go. So over to you, Shawn.
Yeah, so I just posted the link there in the chat, but I think one of the things that we realize and recognize through the preparations of even this panel here is, could we offer something in more of a bite-sized systematic approach to helping people improve and optimize their sleep? So obviously go out and purchase one of the products that Mark and Hannah have. Is going to help you have a great sleep, but also too there's those different tips and tricks. And so from that perspective, what we've done is we've put together a little bit of a sleep program for the month of September. So if you're interested in participating, you can go to the website checkingin.co/sleep and sign up to take the sleep program. Normally there is a cost, but Startup Canada has graciously been able to offer it to all entrepreneurs across Canada free of charge. So thank you, Startup Canada. And from that perspective, what we're really trying to do here is to help people tune in to understand how they can optimize their sleep, give you different tips and tricks to try out, and to ultimately get you to realize what could be your sleep pattern, what could be your cycles, and set you up for the most amount of success, and to do it in a systematic, simple, bite-sized way, in addition to providing you that education. So feel free to come and join us or spread the word. We'd love to be able to help you there.
That's awesome. Thanks, Shawn. Hey, Kayla.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to both Shawns and to Hannah and Mark. This has been such a fascinating conversation. And I think I think all of us are echoing that it is such an important one. But this is really, the permission slip for every entrepreneur that needs it at this time, to prioritize your sleep, to be more productive, to take your business to the next level, and to know in your gut that is the right call. I think is ultimately a confidence piece that all of us can kind of embed into our day-to-days. One of my biggest takeaways is the respect of the transition moments of your day, trying to respect, your transition into sleep, out of sleep, and carving out time just as you would for any other business meeting or, critical team meeting that you would have, carving out that space for yourself, and honoring it just as you would another commitment in your calendar.
Kayla, I'd like to know from you though, have you had any COVID dreams?
No, I haven't had COVID dreams. I'm dreaming of traveling these days. That's what is occupying my brain, getting on an airplane. But like you, Shawn, I hit the pillow and I fall asleep quite quickly. I think it's because I run so high energy during the day that it just sort of depletes right before I go to bed. But no COVID dreams for me. But final thank you to Shawn and the entire BDC team. I can say, as an incredible support organization supporting entrepreneurs in building their businesses, the entire team at BDC has been so committed to the mental health of entrepreneurs, and providing resources, championing these conversations, and also partnering so actively with Startup Canada, so that we can have these conversations with our communities. So thank you.
My team will just kill me if I don't mention bdc.ca/wellbeing. So we have a plethora of tools and activities there for entrepreneurs who are concerned with their mental health. So I do encourage you all to consult that. So that's the last time I'll interrupt you. Sorry.
That's exactly what I was transitioning into, Shawn. So we're right on the same page. You can also see some of those resources in our weekly newsletter from Startup Canada. We have an entire powered by BDC mental health resource corner. We profile some of those resources, some materials from CheckingIn challenge, and Mark's products as well we featured before. So you can sign up for our newsletter and you get a weekly dose of that every Monday morning. I want to thank Shawn for all of your work on the CheckingIn challenge. It has been such a pleasure partnering with your team and getting this incredible challenge out to our startup communities and entrepreneurs across Canada. So thanks for joining us, Shawn. And then to Hannah and Mark for having the courageous new business idea to really solve this problem from a product development perspective. And we cannot wait to see where this journey of entrepreneurship takes you both.
Well, thank you so much, Kayla. Thank you, Shawn and Shawn. Truly our pleasure. Really glad to be able to be here and talk about sleep and mental health, because they're both super important and a huge part of what every entrepreneur is thinking about.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's session. We will be continuing to have these conversations through our Startup Canada communities, talking about sleep, talking about anxiety, talking about other parts of your mental health, so that entrepreneurs, one, don't feel alone, but two, we have a direct connection to some of the resources that are accessible across the country. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy a great night's sleep tonight. Thanks again for tuning in.
I'm off for a nap.
Yeah, time for a nap. Bye, everyone.
Bye now.